Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
On to the P.A.S. Report Podcast is your host, Nick Giordano. Glad you could be here. I have a great guest coming on. Before I get to the guest, make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast. Also, visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. And I want to welcome George Hill back to the program, retired FBI agent or recovering FBI agent, however you want to put it, and FBI whistleblower. George, thank you for joining me. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Analyst, Supervisory Intelligence Analyst.
See,
I don't want to upset people.
Well, I mean, listen, you know what? The way the FBI is operating, it really is astounding to me. Now, you just participated in Dinesh D'Souza and Dan Bongino's film, Police State, and it is available for streaming at this point, so anyone could go online and get it. I have links up at the PAS Report website. George, explain to the audience a little bit about this documentary and why it's so important.
So the documentary, because a lot of Americans are visual learners and they don't, they may see news articles, they may dismiss them out of hand depending on the source, and it hasn't affected them. So based on my conversations with Dan and Dinesh, that one of their goals of the movie was to present in a visual format in a manner which Americans have grown accustomed to since Hollywood, to be able to understand what's going on in their country and see it visually and the trauma that is inflicted on people, as well as going beyond, podcasts like yours, with guests like myself, and look at, things that the FBI is saying, granted, using actors in their own words, about targeting these extreme MAGA Republicans.
And I think it's important out there because, let's face it, most of us, we speak in these echo chambers with people that already agree, but by putting it on film, by putting it on the big screen, it adds a different element. It may draw in people that really don't pay attention to politics. I think that some of us in the political world, we think politics is everything. We follow it closely, and we assume other people do too. But the vast majority of Americans actually don't. So what do you think is the most important takeaway from this film?
That your civil liberties are gone, past tense, that we are actually currently now living in a police state.
And how did we get here? We already spoke about September 11th on a previous episode, but it seems like in the last few years, everything has really come to a head. What happened over the last few years that really changed everything?
Yeah, without rehashing the subjects that you and I have taken deep dives on in the past, and I realize some people may chafe at this, but I think Donald Trump was probably the catalyst that caused them to step on the accelerator and drive forward, in that his goal was to expose permanent Washington, sometimes referred to as the deep state. And as Senator Chuck Schumer from New York said, you have, if you go against the intelligence agencies, they have 7 ways from Sunday to get back at you. And we're seeing that played out. John Solomon just the other day broke that from Just the News that the DOJ has been spying on members of Congress and the Senate since 2017, so even before Donald Trump. So there clearly is an element within Washington, D.C. that sees themselves as not only our betters, but our rulers, regardless of the electoral process.
Yeah, and our unelected bureaucrats were never meant to be the ones that make decisions. And it's terrifying when you think that sitting members of Congress, the ones with the power of oversight over these agencies and departments, the ones that could rein in these agencies and departments, are being spied on. But we saw this in 2015 when the Senate Intelligence Committee was investigating the CIA. The CIA was caught spying on the sitting members of the United States Senate, and nothing happened. Why do you think Congress doesn't do anything? And I know a lot of it's speculation, but there's people that think that, that it's just that these entities, the intel and the law enforcement community, have envelopes on every single one of these individuals and they could blackmail them. Or is it why is there so much fear amongst members of Congress to target these agencies and departments?
I don't think there's a simple answer to that, just like one answer that answers the question in its entirety. I think there are multiple elements to that. Number one, I think that some members of Congress and the Senate are actually afraid of the intelligence communities, and for good reason. We see what's going on with Menendez from New Jersey. Apparently, he ran afoul of someone, and some faithless person said, okay, that's enough of Bob. He's out of here. And where we have the Biden crime family, who's done far worse than what Menendez has done, and they continue to go on. So I think there is an unwritten no, no, we won't shoot at you and you don't shoot at us agreement between certain members of Congress and the executive branch, between them and the intelligence community. But I also think that, and granted, my experience on Capitol Hill is pretty limited, having only been there to testify once, but there was a lot of interactions for a year prior to that. It became very clear to me that the congressmen and the senators are nothing more than mouthpieces, and that their offices are run by 30-somethings from Ivy League colleges, lawyers who aspire towards a career in politics. And that's very troublesome. When, again, you have another group of unelected people who are saying, here, read this. Here, this is our position on this. What do I do with this? So the dependency of the congressmen and senators on their staffers is very troubling.
I agree with that. And they serve as gatekeepers. It makes it really difficult. And a lot of the members of Congress, they like the show of everything, but they don't like to put in the actual work of doing something about it. Many of these abuses. Now, I mean, listen, I think you're spot on. Biden makes Menendez look like a piker after all the corruption that we've witnessed coming out. We just had the House Oversight Committee release a $200,000 check from Biden's brother to the president. And he says it's for a loan repayment. And this money was given, this check was written after the brother received a contract from a hospital that was trying to influence the government. I mean, how much more evidence do we really need of actual corruption of the Biden family?
Apparently, we haven't reached that threshold yet. I mean, 20, what are we up to? 20 now, LLCs, limited liability corporations, and not one single EIN, employee identification number, associated with any one of those LLCs other than the Biden family themselves. Did these entities just run on their own by automatic pilot with no website, no 800 number, no nothing? I mean, it's just...
And the Bidens are from Delaware, where Delaware is a corporate-friendly place where most LLCs, a lot of them, get registered through Delaware. So they chose not to register through the United States and through Delaware. They chose to do it overseas.
Yeah, no, it's I don't understand. I spend probably more time than I should looking at Twitter. Truth Social is nice, but I prefer the cesspool because I'd like to see how the other side is thinking. And they're just so dismissive of it. You've got an overwhelming abundance of evidence that Congressman Comer has put forward in his investigation, who's been doing unbelievable work unearthing all these payments and movement of funds, and yet you're never going to get anybody at the DOJ to do anything with this. They're never going to. They may sacrifice up some people like Bob Menendez, but oh look, shiny object, oh look, squirrel, but they're not going to do. The DOJ is not going to do anything with it. I mean, going back to my comment for just a few seconds ago, where DOJ was investigating members of Congress in 2017. Permanent Washington does what permanent Washington does to stay permanent.
Yeah, and it used to be that we had a media where obviously the political class protects the political class. That's nothing new. That's actually existed long before the United States. I mean, it's as old as time. But when our media, they've become just mouthpieces of the government, have they not? They're part of this police state because essentially they could start the fire. They could put the pressure to make charges come, to make the DOJ answer questions, to make the DOJ push forward, like they did in the Nixon case. Once they exposed the whole Watergate scandal, well, it didn't matter what members of Congress wanted to do. It was about optics, and they had to respond to that. Isn't that correct? Like the media has now become part of this police state apparatus?
Yes, but I don't know if the media is the tail or it's the dog. I'm not entirely 100% confident that the Democrats in Capitol Hill and in the executive branch don't take their marching orders from the media. I mean that sincerely. I'm not, I could be persuaded by a good argument either way. I'm not sure who's zooming who.
It's hard to say, because if you look at most members of the media today, they weren't trained independent journalists. Most members of the media actually come from political offices. They are former spokespersons for candidates, former spokespersons for elected officials. They worked in the bureaucracy. That's where the revolving door between the media and government begins to blur the lines. And it's not just the media and the government. It's government and corporations. Just look at how many former generals sit on defense boards, retired employees serving as consultants. Now, George, we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to ask you about the biggest threat we face. So everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. When things go sideways, you want to be prepared. Protect you and your family. And people are concerned. They might have to go for a long time without food, electricity. That's why I want to introduce you to 4patriots.com. Get preparedness products you could use now, and that could save your life later. My favorite is 4Patriots' new solar generator, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. It uses the endless free power of the sun to power your lights, your TV, medical equipment, even run your fridge. Plus, it's expandable and comes with a free solar panel. Or you can pick up one of 4Patriots' best-selling survival food kits. Delicious tasting and designed to last for 25 years. They even have kits with real meat. And if the power's out, no worries. Just boil water over fire, simmer, and serve. You're going to enjoy a hot meal and stay safe in a crisis. More smart people than ever are finding 4Patriots. Over 2 million customers trust them, and you might have even seen them on TV. I had the folks at 4Patriots set up a special page for you at 4patriots.com/PAS so that listeners of this podcast can see this week's discounts and deals before they go away. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS, but you gotta hurry because the deals don't last long. So save more money, get peace of mind, and protect you and your family. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS. Welcome back, everyone. George, when you look at what's going on, one of the targets, obviously, conservatives, you have parents being targeted, traditional Catholics being targeted, Trump supporters being targeted, and the DOJ and FBI come out and scream that these are the biggest threats. Domestic terrorism is the biggest threat we face. Now, given what's going on in the Middle East, recognizing that this is going to have real implications for us in the United States, how bad do you think that the FBI, the DOJ, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Biden administration dropped the ball when it comes to the wide open southern border?
I don't think they dropped the ball. They never picked it up. And when it was handed to them in the election, they threw it away. It
was Biden's first act was to end the Stay in Mexico policy.
Right.
That was one of his first executive orders.
So I'm convinced. I agree with our founders and other people of note throughout our country's history that the United States is pretty much unbreakable from an external force, that it has to be collapsed from within. And the two easiest pillars for a politician to collapse are open borders and profligate spending. And our debt has been downgraded. We're seeing other countries, starting to find other ways to facilitate international trade. So that whole Bretton Woods construct has ended. It ended actually when the Berlin Wall came down, but it's, we're seeing now, the ice dam really start to break, and that those changes taking place throughout the globe. You had mentioned the Middle East a few seconds ago, but no, I believe it's intentional, that the constitutional republic as it's constructed is antithetical to really a darker side of human nature, that they don't like average citizens deciding their own futures. And I'll just give a small example of that: the attack on the automobile. There's nothing more empowering to an individual than to be able to get out of their, get up out of their couch, go out to their driveway, get in their car, and do what they want to do. But if you herd them all into cities, you put them on public transportation, you put them on a digital dollar, they become much more controllable. So I think there is an element to the human psyche that desires control. And unfortunately, the people, and I think that was one of the messages of police state was that, and that, this could be taken away from you, and it's being taken away incrementally. I was just in Vancouver, Canada a few weeks ago, and they were so proud of how they're moving everybody into the city and their bicycle lanes and high-rise housing that they're building in beautiful Vancouver to kind of tamp down on personal owned vehicles and single family homes. And we've seen, I think, in Washington State and other places where they've tried to make single family homes illegal. So it's about control.
Well, and in Vancouver, did you see the actual crack stores, the drug stores, where you could legally purchase these hardcore narcotics? So it's about, hey, we're going to control your life, but get high and just ignore what we're doing, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But George, I have to say, I mean, they keep telling us that the reason they're doing all these things is because of the threats to democracy. They're trying to save democracy, and they have to destroy democracy so they can rebuild it in their image. Are you telling me that they're nefarious, that it's not really about democracy or the people's will? And we are a constitutional republic. I always make that clear, because it's not necessarily solely about the people. It's about a system of checks and balances and separation of powers, 3 branches of government, each one having different philosophical purposes. And yet we're seeing the walls be broken down. Now, as far as the border goes, are you concerned by the number of terrorists that may have crossed through the border from international terrorist organizations over the course of the last 3 years?
So, yes, I'm a finance guy. So I actually like statistics, and I like numbers. My bachelor's in science is in finance. So if you have, let's just spitball it. Say of those 7 million illegals, and I think most people will agree on that number. Most of those people really haven't been screened. It's like, what's your name? My name, Jose Jimenez. Those of you who watch Ed Sullivan, we get the joke, but it's, they're throwing out information. None of this is verified. These people are not showing up with documentations to prove their identity. Essentially, they can say whoever the hell they want to say their name is and their background and where they came from. We're not doing DNA swabs. So you got 7 million people who have broken into our house. If 1% of those 7 million people are either foreign terrorist organizations or from governments that want to hurt us, if just 1% of those people are problematic, that's 70,000 people in the country that could do a lot of damage very quickly if they were organized. Furthermore, let's say that all these people are on the up and up. They all just want to partake in the American dream and live happily ever after and raise their family and get a job and pay taxes. Well, right now, almost all of them are living on some form of federal assistance. If the executive branch wanted to create massive turmoil in the country that would make the George Floyd riots of 2020 look like a hiccup, you just turn off the funding. So all these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that are depending on federal dollars to keep these people housed and fed.
Most being far-left organizations.
Right. So where are these 7 million people going to go for housing and food if Uncle Sam decides they're not going to pay for it anymore?
Yeah, and that's a big problem. I mean, I remember, if you study immigration, you know that prior to the 1970s, 1980s, that people that came here with a couple dollars in their pocket, and that's it. And they had to fend for themselves. They were on their own.
Right. That was part of the law, though.
What?
That was part of the law.
It was.
Teddy Kennedy changed that.
Absolutely. And it should always be part of the law, right? I mean, if people want to come to the United States and they want to work hard and make it on their own, that's phenomenal. We want to encourage people like that. But when people come and they're getting government resources, well, there's limited money in the pot. So if you have all these people coming in, well, you're going to have to start reducing the benefits to the American citizens, the people that actually live here, that were born here, or that did come here the right way through the legal mechanisms. Now, one thing I found really concerning was the DHS report that had 4 Iranians that were on watch lists getting caught at our southern border the same month that we saw the Hamas attacks in Israel. Is that a coincidence, or is there something much more to that?
No, I would think that I would assess that that's more of a coincidence than something more nefarious to it. We know that Iran has had a cozy relationship with the communist regime of Venezuela for quite a few years now, and that they have been sharing best practices and moving people from Quds Force in and out of Venezuela to help the Venezuelans train. And, I don't think it was in a linear fashion nefarious that what happened on October 7th and then what the 4 Iranians coming across the border when they did. I think it's just a matter of sheer volume and just a matter of time. So, if we caught 4, there's probably, 300 that are roaming around.
Without a doubt. I mean, a nation's engaged in espionage, but it gets much more concerning when you see where the direction that everything's being headed in. And what do you make of the Hamas situation, the terror attacks that happen, and then you see American citizens and a good deal of them on these university campuses basically saying what Hamas did was good, celebrating, calling them martyrs, and holding signs by any means necessary to destroy Israel, from the river to the sea, which obviously means the elimination of Israel, using paragliders as symbol. What do you make of that as someone that was in the intelligence field?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. So you used the term by any means necessary, BAM. That was actually a motto during the George Floyd riots, by any means necessary. So is that an accident that they picked up that rallying cry, or is there something more nefarious afoot here? There seems to be a money trail between the Open Societies Foundation, founded by George Soros, run by his son Alex, into that latest insurrection that took place on Capitol Hill. And then the support of Hamas terrorists. We know that the FBI took a knee during the George Floyd riots to support BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter supports Hamas. Well, then by logic and reasoning, then the FBI supports Hamas. So this whole thing just escapes me entirely. The students that are protesting in favor of Hamas, where were these students protesting in favor of ISIS? It's the same ilk. We're talking about a foreign terrorist organization that my time at the National Security Agency and the FBI, Hamas wasn't really on our radar because Hamas's focus was on Israel. But what has happened since October 7th is we've created this vortex that could very well suck us all into, a major global conflict. But back to your original question, on the student end of it, I hate to say it because I'm a guy, but I think some of the 20 or 21-year-old guys are like, hey man, I can, there's a lot of hot chicks out there that are protesting. I'm going to, hang out with them and from the river to the sea, or, it's just, I think there's some of those idiots out there that, what the communists refer to as useful idiots. But a lot of people are ignorant. I talk to educated people. They don't even know that Israel had offered Hamas the Palestinians a two-state solution 4 times since 1949. Yasser Arafat met with Bill Clinton for 2 weeks at Camp David, and Bill Clinton afterwards said all he said for 2 weeks was no. And then Yasser Arafat, when he went back to wherever, Jerusalem, said, well, if I had agreed to a deal, I would have been dead by morning. So, these people are they're ignorant, which makes them easy to manipulate. And, I think it's problematic because based on what I've been reading over the last 2 days, there is a potential for the Muslim community in countries that are either not threatening to Israel or not threatening on the global stage, the level of emotion that's taking place in the U.S. being duplicated in these foreign Muslim countries, Islamic countries, to actually topple their own governments. Because if their governments don't respond to an Israeli incursion into Gaza, could we see another toppling of the Egyptian government? The Egyptians have moved 3 divisions into the Sinai Peninsula. Nobody's talking about it to keep the Palestinians out. So there's a lot of things that are being shoved around here that could all fall apart very quickly. Within you could wake up tomorrow morning to a very different world.
I keep saying it. When Trump was in office, I would wake up wondering what was the palace intrigue and gossip that's going to be hitting the headlines. Now I wake up wondering if World War III started. It's amazing. Now, when we look at Middle Eastern politics, it's extremely complicated. Most people don't have a clue of how complicated it is. And you're right, politics is 2-level game theory. These Arab nations have to satisfy a domestic audience, and at the same time, they have to satisfy an international audience. It's a tightrope. And people got offended when the King of Jordan didn't meet with President Biden. But if he did meet with President Biden, it might have led to his overthrow. King Abdullah is an ally, and he does what we want. That's what you want in the Middle East. But people don't see the nuances and complexities at all. They only see what they want to see. George, we have to go to a quick break, but I have a really important question for you when we get back. So everyone hang tight. Welcome back, everyone. Now, George, I got a straightforward question for you. How frightened are you that President Biden, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, may be the Commander-in-Chief in a world war? Does that terrify you?
No, because he's not the Commander-in-Chief. I don't know who's running the executive branch, but I'm supremely confident it's not him. He hasn't seen the ball since kickoff. I mean, no.
Fair point.
And that scares me more of all. I don't know who's running our executive branch. That bothers me. If it were Joe Biden and I was confident that it was Joe Biden, I'd be like, okay, I disagree with him on this. I agree with him on that. I think he's a little off on this. I could be okay with that. But I don't know who's running the executive branch. And there are a lot of theories out there, and I'm not going to touch any of them.
Well, Dinesh and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I said that I think that's the scariest part. You know, it's easy to just be like, oh, well, former President Obama's really running things. And it's nice if we just point to one person and identify that as the person. But what if it's the nameless, faceless bureaucrats that are actually the ones running it? And I do believe that that's what's going on. Yeah. It's the unelected bureaucrats that have essentially seized power without openly admitting that they seized power. Do you think I'm onto something?
No, firmly agree. I couldn't agree more. And we even talked about this 15 minutes ago in your show, that it's permanent Washington that is calling the shots. And, and that's what police state was about. We do not have a representative democracy any longer. My vote means nothing in the state that I reside. There are people calling the shots, running things, and we have no idea who they are. People can speculate. Maybe if we ever got a hold of Jeffrey Epstein's client list, we might have a clue who's running things. But I have no idea.
Well, now we could go by the Clinton, where she wants to do formal deprogramming.
Talk about saying the quiet part out loud, right? I mean, that was scary. The alleged scare quote leak to Newsweek. First off, FBI leakers / whistleblowers do not leak to Newsweek, and they write this tome, about these insurrectionists and these extreme MAGA Republicans. And in the very next day, Hillary Clinton comes out talking about re-education camps. Hillary Clinton, as much as I dislike her, is a smart woman, and she doesn't say things unintentionally.
100%. I mean, and when she's saying formal deprogramming, and I'm just thinking of all the people that have mysteriously met their demise that near the Clintons. I'm like, I wonder if that was the formal deprogramming she's talking about. And I know people are gonna be like, oh, that's tinfoil hat stuff, but it's funny. And at least, in times like these, we do have to laugh a little bit, because what else do we have? Now,
yeah, I'm a military guy, former jarhead and retired Navy senior chief. It's gallows humor. It's a perfectly acceptable way, well documented, with people with lots of letters after their name, as a way of dealing with really bad news or information or events. It's gallows humor, and it's sad, but it's okay for us military people to have to use gallows humor to deal with the death of comrades and the like. But it's sad when Susie Homemaker and Joe Sixpack have to use gallows humors to deal with things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just find that people of a certain political persuasion, like myself, are generally happier in life than people of the other political persuasion. But I do have to ask, because the majority, and we alluded to this early in the episode, the majority of people don't get involved. I mean, if you look at the latest Louisiana governor's race, this is a governor's race. Only 35% of the people turned out to actually vote. Now, it was during an awkward time. It's not November, but still, the fact that only 35% of people are turning out to vote for an elected official, the chief state officer, is disturbing. And we see this trend all throughout the country. I mean, our voter turnout usually doesn't top 55% in a presidential election. It's actually very rare. It's mostly in the upper 40s, lower 50 percentile. Do you think that if people wake up, because you can manipulate the vote only so much, right? I mean, if the majority of people actually wake up and actually go out there and start voting, do you think things could turn around, or do you think we're too far gone?
At the federal level, we're too far gone. There needs to be a convention of the states. I know that you've been an active participant and mover in that effort. But I think people need to realize, maybe turn off Fox News and go to your local news, or turn off MSNBC. The most important people in my life are my state representatives and my governor. It shouldn't be the president of the United States, the Congress, and the Senate. It was never intended to be like that. And we need to focus on, local issues. I signed a petition the other day to require a picture of voter ID in my home state. Get involved locally. I think the federal government's too far gone. And until there's either a convention of the states or a complete financial collapse of the country, that this Leviathan is just going to run its course to some horrible ending. But I think one can find, you can find a more receptive audience at a town hall meeting for your local town or even, small city than you can trying to deal with a federally elected official.
And I always say local government, it's actually the most important. It affects your life much more than the national government in a sense. And when it comes to local issues, a lot of them actually transcend party lines. So you can actually get good agreement. It's not just Republicans that go into potholes and get flat tires. Democrat cars do too. So that's important. But so many people, they were never taught about our system. They were never taught about the concept of federalism and that you have a federal government that is independent from the state governments and they each have their own respective powers. And that's why every issue is getting federalized today. On the federal level, do you think it would help, not that we have members of Congress that have cojones to do it, but do you think it would help if we start, one, slashing agencies, just totally getting rid of them, but more importantly, some of the ones I would love to see the FBI defunded, but I doubt that will ever happen. Do you think it would be beneficial to start moving them out of Washington, D.C., like put FBI headquarters in Alaska and put CIA headquarters in North Dakota, moving them outside of the swamp area?
I think President Trump actually started to do some of that during his short time in office. But it absolutely would help because you've got this permanent Washington class during, I forget what year it was, I'm sure your listeners know, during the Obama administration, we had that pretty severe recession. Every county in the United States saw a decline in economic activity during that recession, except Northern Virginia, Loudoun County, and Washington, D.C. They all did fine. So that dynamo needs to be disrupted somehow. And I'm going to get it wrong, but there's something called Project 2025 that talks about ending various government agencies that aren't expressly called out for in the Constitution. I think the Chevron overturning of the Chevron agreement by the Supreme Court, I think that's probably not until 2024, can begin that process where we don't have to worry about moving agencies out of D.C., where we can start to defang these federal agencies that are acting like legislative bodies. But yeah, no, absolutely. Moving some, agencies that are, I guess, sacrosanct out of DC and ending the K Street lobbyist and this whole, revolving little kingdom that exists in and around DC would certainly help.
Yeah, maybe the peasant class could get some of their powers back if they actually exercised it. So hopefully that happens too. George, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to speak with the audience. Always love the conversation. Hope to do it again. Thanks for coming on.
So real quick, I want to apologize to you and your listeners. I'm at a hunting cabin in upstate New York. I'm not properly attired. The lighting's not the best, but I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to come on your show, Nick.
The background and the lighting and all that, it's not important. It's the messaging that's important. That's what I always say. People could have the Hollywood production, which Dinesh did an amazing job with that. But the message is what's most important out of everything. And that's why people need to wake up. They need to get involved and they need to I'm not ready to surrender this country yet.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.